Hello, this is Dr. Barry Graham of Southwestern Christian College, and once again, this video is for the purpose of us reviewing the material that we've covered in previous sessions. Last we met on July 26, 2018. We covered a number of things, answered a number of questions. Most of that material were things that we had covered previously, and so you can see those in the other videos that we've made available to you here on the resource page. One thing that I don't believe that we've reviewed in the video is very important, and that's how to set up your grade book. So let's look at that right now. Here's a course, sample course that we created. This is not an actual course taught at Southwestern Christian College. Bible 777. We go to the course drop-down menu, as I just did. We click on it, and we have already brought in the standard course template here. And of course, as we've learned previously, we're replacing all of this content that exists on here. This content we brought in from another course, just to give you an idea of what it would look like. But of course, we've instructed you in how to delete this content and replace it with your own. But for the purposes of this video, we want to look at the gradebook and especially the gradebook setup. If we click on gradebook, we see that there's no students because no one has enrolled yet for this course. And we also notice that there's nothing under grading period, all grading periods, materials, due dates, all of these different options that you have. There's basically nothing to access here because we haven't created anything. So to do that, it's very important that we look at our grade setup right underneath gradebook. We're going to click on it, and here we're going to go through this from the top down, show you how to set up your gradebook within Schoology. One of the things you'll want to do first is set up your categories. You have different types of assignments, which will of course be evaluated by your assessments and your rubrics, and those of course will be linked to your SLOs, and which Schoology calls learning objectives. We call them student learning outcomes. To add a category, and by the way, this little question mark Q, if you'll mouse over it, this will always give you a nice little thumbnail description of that particular item. Grading categories are required to use the gradebook, so obviously you must set those up. Assignments without categories will be ungraded, and so whereas you might sometimes want an ungraded assignment, most of the time those will be something that you'll want to be graded. So to add one, we're going to click Add. All right, and let's say on this, a category name, you have your tests or quizzes. So we're going to name one of our categories tests, and you can choose either points or percentage. You can look more in detail on much of the information online in Schoology and some of the training videos that we've already uploaded, but we're going to choose percentage here. And you also have an option to drop the lowest grade in a particular category. So if you're going to give, say, 10 tests and you want to have the option of being able to drop the lowest grade so that that doesn't lower the student's grade, you can do that. And so you can actually drop the lowest 2 grades if you wanted to, the lowest 5 grades. More than likely it's not going to get into a large number like that, but for the time being, let's say that you're a pretty strict teacher and you're not going to drop any grades at this point. So you're going to create a category, and these are going to be your tests. You could also call it exams, you could call it quizzes, whatever you prefer. Create, and now you'll notice that we indeed do have a category. We can delete that if we decide that we've made a mistake at some point, and we just simply click the X here and we can do that. Let's add another category, And let's say in this particular category, we're going to have our pop quiz, or quizzes if you wanted to make it plural, but just something to indicate this is your pop quiz category. Again, since you might give a lot of pop quizzes, you might want the option to drop some of the lower ones, but again, if you don't, you don't. We're going to remember to change this to percentage in this case, and we're going to click create. And so we're just continuing to add categories here. Now some of you might be wondering, well, what about my midterm exam? What about my final exam? Can I add them here? And the answer is yes, you certainly can, but remember that we're also going to show you how down here in the grading periods you can also add your midterm quiz, midterm exam, and your final exam down there if you want to create separate grading periods for that. The advantage to that is that you can have all of these things come up to an eventual 100% up here, with the idea that you can begin to weight or value the midterm exam or final exam down here. You can do it either way. More than one way to do these various things, more than one option. But at this point, what I would like to do is to show you how to actually add your midterm and exam and your final exam when we get down here. If you would like to do it up here, please contact me and I'll be glad to show you how to do that. Now we're going to add one more category, and let's say you have an additional category here for your class projects. You have some collaborative projects that you want your students to work on. Again, we're going to change that to percent. Drop lowest, we're going to leave it at 0. Now at this point, we have 3 categories, and they're all going to count exactly the same value up here before you get to any kind of midterm or final exam, if you leave it like that. If in your class you like to weight your particular assignments, and most instructors will do that, you can do that right here. Notice that if I check this little box, again, they're all weighted 100%, and so that makes the percentage value 33.33 basically a piece. But let's say in this particular class you want your tests to weigh more than your other assignments. You want your tests to weigh, basically, you want the value of those to be 50% of what they do up here, 50% of 100%. And then these two to be worth basically the same. This is 25%, and this one also then, in order to add up to be fully 100, will be 25%. If you've done it correctly, the percentages over here will match the weight over here. And since I did do the math correctly, it turned out exactly that. So now your tests all together, this is not an individual test here, these are all the tests they'll be taking throughout the course of the semester, will be worth a total of half of their score up here in their categories. Their various projects will be worth 25%, and their pop quizzes will be 25%. If that's the way you've traditionally done it, or you want to do it in your class, you can do it. If not, you can change it. You can even change it after the fact if you want to, but most of the time you're letting them know this in your syllabus, so I wouldn't do a lot of changes to this unless of course you just need to, and then of course you can always inform the student in class or by message, email, that this has changed. But by all means, we'll obviously want to keep the student informed on this. Now we have our weighted categories at this point. Down here we have our grading periods and final weights in terms of the way their final grades are going to be calculated. Right now there's nothing but the particular period that we're in, and of course it's weighted at 100%, and that of course makes perfect sense. But many of you give a midterm exam and a final exam. So that's why there's an option down here to add this, so to where when you do, that midterm exam and that final exam are actually going to be added right here. If we click this, if we for some reason have chosen the wrong grading period, we can change it right here. So I just wanted to show you how that works. Now you'll notice that there's no way to add a midterm or a final exam right here. There's just the grading period. That actually has to be done when you design and create your midterm exam and you create your final exam. So I'll be showing you in this video how that works. Then we'll go back to the grade setup and we'll show you how it'll appear here once you're finished. But we'll just leave it like this for the time being and continue on in these settings. Again, remember to mouse over the question mark should you have questions, and they'll give you a little thumbnail description of that. Gradebook scale. We want to pick standard grading scale. That's been created for you by the administrators, so you have access to that. Right here, this is I think is a good option, best practice wise. Go ahead and check this. I think it's always good to round off the final grades. That way the students are not saying, okay, your grade is 77.86. Student doesn't care about that. They just want to say, oh, it's a 78. It rounds off to a 78. Down here are also some potentially important things. If for any reason during a course it's necessary for you to override a grade, let's say there's a situation where a student has made arrangements with you to do some extra credit and you don't have that entered as a category up there, or for whatever reason you need to override and change rather, which is override, a student's grade for a particular reason, you'll want to make sure this column is here. Now again, you can always go back in and add this later. If you don't think you need it right now, then don't check it. But check it if you think it's a possibility that you might need it. But once again, you can do that later. There are some other things in terms of hiding some things. Grade period override columns, you normally won't have to worry about that. Total points column, we're doing percentages, you probably won't need that. Hide overall grade from student grade report, you probably will not want to do that. Hide grading period grades and student grade, again, probably won't need to do that. At this point, you're ready to save your changes. Now, if you don't click this button, it won't save. So we're going to go ahead and save it, and now everything is saved. Now you're pretty much set up at this point, except for your midterm exam and except for your final exam. That's going to be done within your course as you create those particular assignments. So again, you don't have to worry about doing that right now, but you will have to be concerned with it once you add those particular assignments, because you're going to want to make sure you change the weight here once you do that, depending upon how you weight those things. So let's show you how to do that at this point. We're going to go back to the course, which we can always access right up here at the top in the little hyperlink here. We're going back into the course. Now, right here, there is a formative assessment for midterm. In this case, in the template, it's under week 9. As we've explained to you, you don't have to use weekly topics. It could be your topics take up more than 1 week, but you must have topics. So whatever topic you end the midterm with, the midterm will follow it, usually during week 9. We're going to click on that, and here is a midterm exam as an example that's already been set up, and this will be a perfect way to show you how to make sure this is designated in your gradebook setup as your midterm exam. The way we're going to do that is once you've set it up, and in this case this is, as we open it up, just a one-question exam. Yours will obviously be much longer than that, and you may also have essay questions in there and short answer questions, and again, it'll be much more elaborate than this. We understand that. But let's go back and remember the little gear icon right here. That's how you're going to be able to edit this. So the first option is to edit. There we go. Now notice right here, we're going to go ahead and change this to the standard grading scale. And notice right here, it's ungraded. You don't have to change that. You can leave that, because what we're going to do right here is the key. Notice this little box here. Set as midterm/final. Very, very important there. We're going to check it, and that's going to automatically, in our grade book, set this up as a separate grading category, not a separate grading category, but a separate grading period. So at this point, we're going to make sure that we put the proper date on it somewhere during week 9. So we can do that. And so if that ends up occurring sometime around second week in October, you would choose something like that. You can put the time in, and you can put some availability and due dates as to when this is going to be available for them to take it. You can also customize the sections that you're working with if you have more than one Bible 777 class or whatever your class is. So we'll leave those alone for the time being, but you can change those. Now we're going to click Save Changes. Now, if we've done this correctly, we're going to be able to go back into our gradebook setup, and now you'll notice, look what's been added, a midterm exam. There it is. So now we have our overall grading period, which includes all of our categories up here, and we have a separate grading period so that it can be weighted separately here for our midterm exam. Let's do the same thing for the final exam. We'll scroll down. There's our final exam. Now, on this one, there was no example final exam that was created, so we'll just do a very simple one real quick. We're going to add a test. On the drop-down, final exam. We're going to change the grading scale to standard grading scale. Now again, your final exam may not be a test quiz. It might be a project. It might be a paper. Whatever it is, that's what you'll choose. We're just doing this one for an example. And again, we're going to click right here, Set as midterm/final. We're going to set it up to where it'll take place at the proper time. In this case, I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it seems like it's somewhere early in December. And again, if this is not correct, just disregard it. But let's say yours takes place December 4th. You put in the proper time, and you'll be ready to go there. And just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and create a question. True, false. We've showed you how to do that before. The Bible has 66 books. Let's look at our options down here by way of review. Remember, by default, the correct answer is always true. That happens to be the case here. The Bible does have 66 books, but if it was false, we could change it. We've already talked about these other options. We've already talked about how you weight individual questions within a test if you want to. So we won't go over that for now. And remember, we will have to align a learning objective, which again we call student learning outcomes. So we'll just do that just to kind of keep us in the practice of doing that. We click on it. We click Custom Learning Objectives because that's where our own personal objectives are. They're housed in our personal learning objectives most of the time. You might be using one that's been shared with a group or one of the school institutional outcomes, and you will perhaps choose one of those as well for mapping purposes. But since that's another topic, we'll skip that for now. This is supposed to be for a Bible class, so obviously I don't teach any of the Bible classes, so let me just pick one out of one of my humanities courses. I'll just pick SLO number 1 right here. Actually, I'm going to pick SLO number 2. Actually, I picked 2 of them. Sorry. But I'm glad I did that. That shows you how you can choose more than one if necessary. I'm going to create the question, and now it's set up, and of course those learning objectives, which I've abbreviated BROBJ on mine there, and that's just my own personal system of doing it. Now it is set up, and since you'll recall, I'll go back to edit here, that we designated this as a sorry about that, let me go back to the overall editing here. Since we designated this as a midterm/final, in this case it's going to be the final, and we saved it that way, if we did it correctly, once we go back to the grade setup now, it should show up, and it does. Now you might think, well, how did it know to do that? Well, we called it midterm exam and final exam, and that's how we can designate which one is which. Now, if we leave these all at 100, which is the same value for each of them, it's going to percentage-wise weight them as, like it did up here earlier when we showed you these three, 33.33. But most of you already have, or should have, in your syllabi how you weight your midterm and how you weight your final. Obviously, the student needs to know that, how much importance or weight value-wise, because they want to know how this is going to affect their grade. So if I know, for instance, that my final exam counts 25% of their grade, I'm going to change that. And let's say that their midterm counts 15% of their grade. Well, I'm going to change that. Now, if that's the case, what I have to do is just do the math to say, okay, what's left over? 25 plus 15, if I'm not mistaken, is 40. 20, 30, 40, yes. So that's 60% that's left. If I did it correctly, my numbers here should match my numbers over here. So now my course is set up to where my grading period will be worth 60%. In other words, everything up here, no matter how I weighted it, the grand total is going to be 60% of their final weight. Even though all of these up here add up to obviously 100%, and we want that, down here when we do our final weights, that's why they call it final weight, this will be worth 60% of their grade, everything up here. The midterm will be worth 15% of their grade, and the final will be worth 25% of their grade. And that's exactly the way it will show up in their grade book, right? So, for instance, now I have different categories that have set up here as I change to my grade book. I've got fall of 2018. In other words, if I just bring that up, I'm just looking at their tests, I'm just looking at their projects, I'm just looking at their pop quizzes, because that's what's categorized in the grading period. But if I click this one, I can see their final and midterm material. This is handy here too. If I bring up no grading period, I can see if I maybe accidentally left some assignment ungraded, and that'll show up in the grade book just here, and I can know to go, I need to go in and tweak that. If there's something in an ungraded category that was supposed to be graded, need to go back into that assignment and change that. So this is a kind of a handy way that you can check that. All right. All grading periods will give me their overall calculated grade. And again, since I added this one, I have a column to optionally override their grade. If this is a student that, again, for whatever reason, I need to change their grade, and this is not being calculated by the grade book, I can manually change it here in that particular case. Now again, I can't really click on any of that at this point. I don't have any assignments. I don't have any students signed up. Of course, that will change when it comes time for the to actually teach the class. All right, there's one other thing that should get you started. There's one other thing very, very important I want you to look at, though, as we go back to the gradebook setup as we conclude. As you know, we've shown you how to import the class template. We'll go back to that real quick and just show it to you. We've also showed you how to not only create material fresh and new for your various folders and topics and things of that nature, but we've also shown you something really important here. Under Add Materials, there's always this option to import from your resources. When I click on that, this will automatically take me to my personal resources. I can also access group resources here, but we're concerned with our personal resources for now. And I've saved those resources in individual folders for my courses. And again, we've showed you how to set those up. If I want to bring in anything from a previous semester, I can not only look in here, but I can also look at courses that I've, even after they're archived, if I want to, but preferably before they're archived at the end of the semester. I've saved, for instance, here my spring 2018 humanities course. I can go here and I can import into my new course anything that I want, including everything if I wanted to. But since we're dealing with a new template, you might find that it's actually easier to just go into the folder and pick individual things. And when I do, and when I import it, it will come straight into whatever folder that I was in. So if I import in, say, this discussion assignment, it'll ask me one more time. Now there it is. I've imported it in this particular folder, which in this case I happen to be in the Let's Get Started folder. You may or may not be in that particular folder, but I just wanted to let you see that it does import it straight into the folder. All right. So this import option works for everything except for your gradebook. That is the one exception. And this is why I wanted to conclude this training video today, to show you how to do that. You can push out your settings from any previous gradebook that you've worked with in the past, and you can push those settings or copy those settings out to your new course. So let's look at that and see how that works. Here's my new course for Humanities 231. I'm looking at my gradebook setup right here. Now in this case, I've already imported these settings in, but I wanted you to see how that worked, how I did that. Normally, this would just be pretty much in a unready state, just like you saw when we opened up that previous gradebook in the Bible 777 course. But I'm going to go by clicking on Courses, See All, and Archived. Remember, my old courses are automatically archived even if the semester's finished, so you can still always get to them. And this is what? Humanities 231. So I'm going to go all the way back to the fall of 2016. I'm sorry, I want to go back to the fall of 2017 because that's more recent. I'm going to open up that course. This is the way it looked back a year ago. And I'm going to go to my gradebook setup. And I'm probably going to want my grade book for this new semester set up very similar, if not maybe even exactly the same, as my setup from this semester. The way you do that, and again, this is key right here. Again, this is the only thing you can't import from your resources. You have to push it out here or copy it directly from your old class. If I click Copy Settings, look what options I get here. I can copy my categories, my grading scales, and really important here, all those rubrics that you've worked so hard on. And I can choose, okay, I'm in Humanities 231. I want to copy these settings to my new Humanities course. So I just check that one. That's the only one I'm concerned with, and I click Copy. Now, since I've already done this, I'm not going to click Copy again, but let's pretend I click Copy. And now, if I go back to my present Humanities 231, the one that I'm going to be teaching in this current semester, if I click on it and click on Gradebook Setup, now all of my categories, all of my rubrics over here, all of my grading periods and gradebook scales and all of that, all of those settings have come in. I don't have to recreate all of those. Yay, right? Saves you a lot of time, and that's what we're hopefully about, among other things, in these training videos. That's it for now. Once again, please message me on our Schoology group page, SWCC Schoology Training. If you should need to contact me, it'll show up right here on this little letter icon. I'll get back with you ASAP. Have a good one, and signing off.